I'll give it just one more minute, see if we get a couple more people in here. Missing, looks like Tracy and let's see, Brian's here, Jen's not here. Tracy and Jen. So bear with me a second. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started and they'll chime in here later, but I think we have a quorum anyway. So I will call the meeting to order. It is June 16th, 2021. It is 3:33 p.m. And this is a meeting of the Unified Development Code Advisory Committee. And we do have a quorum. Stephanie, you want to take roll just for make it official?
Yes, sir. PJ Stevens.
Here.
Tracy Udcac. Jen Henderson. Brian Ortega.
Here.
Brian Robinson.
Here.
Philip Wonky.
Here.
And Jordan Maddox.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, so I guess normally this is where ADQ would have stepped in and started off with a regular session and a discussion on how the UDC Advisory Committee Conference will be conducted. Who's doing that? Ethan, are you going to fill her shoes, or Sophia? Who are we doing this now?
I'm happy to. Essentially, today we are reviewing UDC amendments. There is a request to take action today. I don't see, I do have one member of the audience that does appear to be present. So I just remind that member and all of our participants to mute yourself when you are not speaking, to let us know when you are, who you are when you do speak, so that we can take accurate minutes and can have a good sound quality here for our meeting. Was there more that Adriana usually shared? That's usually our beginning intro for most of our meetings.
I think that's pretty much covers it. So,
okay.
Yeah, it looks like we do have one guest today, I believe, Ross Hunter, maybe Grant. I'm not sure. Grant just popped up on mine, so I'm not sure.
Grant's a new planner in our office, so we'll introduce him later on.
Oh, well, welcome, Grant. Nice to see you. All right, so I believe that covers regular session A and B item. So we can go straight to the legislative regular agenda, which is item C. And that would be consideration and possible action to approve the minutes of the May 12th, 2021 regular meeting of the UDC Advisory Committee. Has everybody received those minutes and taken a look at them? Should have them. And I will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Anyone want a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Brian. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any changes anybody sees that need to be made? I didn't see any personally, but if not, all in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. All right, motion carries unanimous. Okay, moving on to item D. That would be a public hearing and possible action on a proposed text amendment to the UDC relating to the tree preservation and landscaping standards, specifically as it pertains to tree preservation, removal and mitigation, street yard, gateway, and parking landscape standards, and screening and water conservation requirements. UDC General Amendment numbers 20-03. Ethan, I believe that you have the floor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Steve and I are very happy to be with you today for what will hopefully be one of our last discussions on the landscaping and tree preservation amendments that we started discussion with y'all last August. It's been nearly 11 months, believe it or not. that we have had the privilege of talking about updates and cleanups and ways to make our landscaping ordinance and our tree preservation ordinance better. Hopefully today, what we're going to be asking of you guys is to make a recommendation to the City Council on specifically on the second set of items that we considered, that the City Council asked us to look into back in March. So if you remember, back through the fall and up to February, we worked through that first list of items related to street yard landscaping, gateways, water conservation, and cleanups to the tree ordinance. Then in March, this committee took action to make the recommendation on the red line changes to the UDC on those items. The same month, because of some scheduling conflicts with the winter storm and stuff, we did not get the council's feedback on those items until March. They approved of the first list of items that y'all made a recommendation on, but then directed us to work on 2 more items that we've talked over the last few months about tree mitigation in street yards and reducing the size of allowable credit trees. Over the last few months, we worked through those issues together with this committee and then had time to do our receive public input on those items. And so today, hopefully, we will receive a recommendation from you guys on those red lines, which incorporate your direction to us on those proposed terms from our May meeting. Next week, we'll be able to go to 2 weeks, we'll be able to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their recommendation on those items, and then ultimately to the City Council for approval by the end of July. The items we considered back in March, there was a lot of them. So y'all remember that we talked about updates to landscaping, tree preservation, street yards, phasing of landscaping, gateway requirements, and a lot of water conservation, several water conservation issues. Some small changes have been identified since y'all made your recommendation on those since March, mainly just some typos and little administrative things that need to be cleaned up. Nothing that substantially changed the content, but those were included for review in your packet. So if you do see something there that where a change has altered meaning or something, please speak up and let us know. The items that we're going to be asking for your recommendation on today specifically have to do with those 2 items. The first item, you may remember, was about allowing a smaller size of credit tree. Currently, our code says that a developer of a non-residential site, that would be a multifamily or commercial site, who saves a tree between 6 and 11 inches in diameter, can use that tree as credit towards their tree mitigation. What the council asked us to do is consider allowing trees smaller than that. The terms we talked through at your last meeting are on the screen, and the blue and the red reflect changes they all asked us to make at the last meeting. Mainly, trees down to 3 inches can be considered for credit if they meet the criteria here on the screen, that they're in good health, that they won't be impacted by construction, that they're not in the way of planned future expansions, and that they are contributing to what we might call a tree stand. That tree stand definition is one that we added to the UDC last fall together. The idea there being that a 3-inch tree doesn't do much for you if on its own, but several 3-inch trees together can provide a meaningful asset to a site. Ignore Steve's comment there. I apologize.
That last screen you had,
Yes, sir.
I noticed the first 1A, it says trees shall must. So is it shall or must? Or are you about to talk about that?
It's a shall.
Okay, it says shall must, so I would think one or the other.
I apologize for that. In the red lines, it says shall.
Okay, Aye.
I think there were some comments on the PowerPoint I forgot to address before we started today. So that's what those comments are. I apologize. But you'll see that we've taken that list of terms and incorporated it right into the appropriate section of UDC 8.04. Are there any questions, concerns about this? The comment in the big red box on the right has been addressed. It is the first, in the first 3 words of point F. I apologize for that again.
Ethan, question on F.
Huh?
FIF or F(1)(f). Determined by the urban force to be unsuitable based on site conditions. Is that visual site or is that physical site?
Those would be physical site conditions.
Okay,
Um,
got it.
and it's purposely left a little bit vague just because we can't anticipate all conditions.
Got it. Okay, just making sure if we had the spelling on the correct usage of site. SITE or SIGHT.
Oh, I apologize. I will correct that type.
Okay.
Excuse me, one question on item 2 where it says trees shall be in good health and within or near a tree stand. Have we defined tree stand as part of this update?
Yes, sir. Tree stand was part of our work we did last fall. It's essentially a group of trees that share common characteristics such as age, size, health, or aesthetic qualities.
Thank you.
Just a little clarification on C. When you use the phrase have been set aside and planned for future development, do we need to say have been set aside or we can just say areas that are planned for development?
It's a good question. I think either way, the intent is the same. Set aside may make it a bit more clear that we're looking for areas on the plans specifically called out as future development.
Got it.
Any more comments? All right, thank you, Ethan.
Of course. The second item that we're asking for your recommendation on today are those terms for allowing mitigation on residential street yards on single family and 2-family developments. If you remember, this is not anything we've ever allowed before. Mitigation in single family subdivisions traditionally has been provided with on-site plantings in open space lots managed by an HOA, public parkland, the right-of-way, in common areas, essentially. So allowing these plantings on residential street yards would be a new step forward. So at our last meeting, we discussed what is now labeled terms A, B, C, D, and I. And through our discussion on the last meeting, we decided that through our work, that B, C, and D did not quite get at what the committee wanted, but that adding language related to E, F, G, and H would. So firstly, these trees must be of at least a 3-inch minimum caliper when planted. We don't want anything smaller. The allowance for the allowance for counting trees planted in residential street yards for credit can only be activated after you've planted out your common areas to the fullest extent. The reason for that being that those common areas are where we can guarantee there will be maintenance and review for removal. Only trees planted above the minimum landscape requirements can be counted as credit towards mitigation. The trees planted for landscape requirements count for landscape requirements. Any tree planted above that would be counted for mitigation credit. Ratio which credit would be given would be 1/2 inch of credit for each inch of tree planted, whether it's a 3-inch tree, 6-inch tree, etc. And then lastly, we want these trees to at least meet a 15-foot on-center spacing requirement to avoid cramming too many trees in one lot. These terms would be applicable to any property subject to residential building permit. So that would be any single-family development within the city limits, or in the ETJ with a special agreement, like we commonly see for MUDs and PIDs. So these terms all fit on one sheet within the UDC. Questions, comments, more typos?
This may sound like a dumb question, but we're putting this in under the assumption that there is an HOA in place that requires maintenance of the trees that are going to be on the residential lots or replacement, correct? Does it say that?
Even if there was not going to be an HOA, some of the common areas that we would allow planting in, that we already allow planting in, are not areas that might be managed by an HOA. Typically, you do have an open space lot, detention pond, that sort of thing. You do see the HOA because there are, of course, areas that have to be maintained. But spaces like the right-of-way and public parks, you, of course, don't have to have an HOA for those.
Well, I'm saying, like, if we're going to plant trees on somebody's residential lot in order to get credit for them, we want to make sure that they get preserved or maintained, because that's the whole purpose, right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
Is there a requirement somewhere in here that in order to use these credits, you have to have an HOA in place?
No, sir, there's not.
Okay.
I think, PJ, part of our discussion was the fact that once it's planted on a residential lot, the city or no government entity can control whether they cut it down or not. So I think that's why we went with the half credit. So you get 2 trees on 2 different lots, and hopefully one will stay there or some combination there. I think that's kind of how we went about it.
I got you. Okay, I must have forgot about that point, but okay, I got you.
Ethan,
Yes, sir.
do we need to specify the height above grade to measure the caliper, say 12 inches, or what the city standardizes?
So we do that. The abbreviation DBH stands for diameter of breast height. That is an international standard of measurement for trees, which our code defines as being 4.5 feet above grade.
Well, the reason I say that, most new residential trees will be 3 inches at, say, 12 inches above grade. 3 inches at DBH would be quite a significant tree.
Yeah, so for that, we might need to go ahead and make that adjustment. Mitigation is all considered based off the DBH, but like nursery stock standards and measurements in that area are based differently. They're based at so many inches from the actual like root ball itself. So yeah, that needs to be clarified. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, that's a really good comment, because I think this is to be treated as a new tree, not an existing tree.
Right.
So what would be the appropriate wording, Steve, Philip, Brian?
I'll have to look up what the actual like verbiage would be, the way the nursery standards read, but we
There would be
can pull
some sort
that.
of, we can refer to standard nursery practices.
Yeah, and I'm not 100% sure if we have it anywhere else in our code right now. I think
Yeah,
everything.
we
in
may
our
look
code is-
at the required tree plantings and see how it's specified there, or if we have a definition.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can pull it up here quickly.
It may be that area municipalities, they have standards that are pretty, I guess, generalized. I guess, say, the city of Leander, that's one of the things they check at final inspection at, I think it's 12 or 16 inches above soil grade.
Let's see here. Plant installation. Here we go. Standard language in the rest of our UDC reads, shade trees planted to meet the requirements of this chapter shall be a minimum of 3 caliper inches measured at 6 inches above finished grade.
That works. Thank you.
Absolutely. Does that address the concerns, Philip and Brian?
Yes.
Okay. We will just mimic that language that's used in the rest of chapter 8.
Question on number 4, the 15-foot on center spacing.
Mhm.
That does not exist elsewhere in the code, correct? That 15-foot was a new standard that we came up with specifically for this, right?
Go ahead, Steve.
I wonder if, because of the previous statement about trees being planted in the common areas being exhausted, is there any concern that developers, builders might see that 15-foot on center spacing and say, well, I can do that in the common areas, or I can do that anywhere that's a standard I should be able to use? Any thought to that, since the standard does not exist elsewhere? What I would hate to see is everybody just starts planting trees in a common area at 15 feet, and it's a forest in 4 years. Unintentional.
That's another good comment. We should probably specify that the 15 applies to the residential street yard. And I'm not sure if we want to go ahead and add in anything for, the open spaces and things like that. And we have spacing referenced here and there in the code, depending on the situation, for buffers, things like that. But
Street trees, I know, yeah.
yeah, so yeah, we could definitely add that the 15 is specific to the residential street yard location.
And I'm okay with it for the street yards at 15 feet. I think that's reasonable. I just wondered, since it doesn't exist elsewhere, if somebody's trying to get a bunch of trees and trying to meet, compliance, if they'll take that 15-foot standard and say, why can't I do it over here? So just a thought for staff to think about.
Absolutely. I see where you're coming from. Okay, well, I think what I've heard is that in general, these proposed terms and the red lines are good, save for the typo on the first round related to credit trees, and then the language that needs to be changed on how these 3-inch trees are measured here. Awesome. Do want to share with you guys about the public comment period that we went through on these terms here. Of course, round 1, we had the time to post an online survey, reach out to our partners in the development community, and host office hours for folks who were curious about having more. This round was relatively shorter, and so we were only able to go through an online survey. The material was posted online for about 1.5 to 2 weeks, and we received full responses. The responses are included in your packet. We had some very passionate responses that our tree preservation ordinance was not sufficient enough to create the community that respondent desired. Then there were some positive responses that appreciated the balance our proposed amendments struck between preserving trees and giving developers credit for those trees that they would be planting anyways. We had another response which was very interesting that talked about the opportunities to save trees during site construction. That individual felt that in their comments that the way contractors and builders worked was just too damaging, and if there was just a bit more care taken, then you could preserve existing trees on a lot. Were there any questions or concerns about any of the public comments we received?
That's Brian Robinson. It says there are 4 responses. I see 3 bullets. Is there one that wasn't noted?
With the bullets, I meant to just summarize the themes. 2 of the responses were very similar.
Okay.
One even did a written response.
Same thing. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Wonderful. All right. Well,
Thank you.
absolutely. Besides just some outlining of next steps, that is all I have for y'all today. This is a bit unusual for our meetings as it is a public hearing, and we need a motion and official vote to recommend. Other than that, that is really going to be the bulk of my presentation.
Thank you. All right, Ethan. So this is a public hearing, and I'm just trying to help me along, Stephanie. I think, do I need to, we've already opened the public hearing, so I guess I can open it up to any public comments at this point. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. You can
All
just open the public hearing and whoever wants to speak can speak.
All right, and we had Ross on there. I don't see him on there anymore, so I'm not sure that we even have a public at this point. So I'll ask anybody that's out there, anyone have any public comments? Hearing none, we will then close the public hearing. And then I will open it up for, we need to now vote on accepting the 2 proposed amendments. Is it 2? Is that accurate to say the 2 proposed, or there's 2 slides that you had?
Yes, sir. I think that's the best way to phrase it.
Not the most eloquent way to put it, but I will entertain a motion to approve item D, which are the proposed amendments to the UDC that we're just presented with.
I'll move to approve as presented.
All right, we have a motion from Philip, a second.
I'll
from
second.
Ryan Ortego. Okay, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of approving these 2 amendments, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, hearing none, it's unanimous. Passes. Thank you, Ethan.
Absolutely.
Todd?
I will go over just some next steps with y'all.
Okay,
And provide you with some specific dates if you know anyone who's interested in following these amendments. P&Z will consider the same amendments this committee considered on July 6th. And then you'll see these on the city council agenda with both of their July meetings, 13th and 27th. Typically, these UDC ordinances are effective immediately. So after July 27th, you can get some credit for trees in your street yards.
great. That's great news. Thank you, Ethan.
Absolutely.
All right, so that ends item D. And Sophia, did you have anything to add, or are we ready to adjourn?
I just wondered if Ethan wanted to introduce Grant. Grant reports directly to Ethan, and I thought that might be a good opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So Grant joined us last Monday. This is day 8. He hasn't run off yet, so I think that's a good sign. But Grant graduated from Kansas State with his master's in community and regional planning this spring, and is just kind of returning to the Austin area where he grew up. And so we're very lucky to have him.
Great.
Grant is our associate planner, and so he'll help a lot with the front desk work, some building permit, CFO review. But essentially, if you're calling for help for the first time, you're going to talk to Grant. He will be that person for us. It's was a wonderful opportunity that the city council gave us in a mid-year budget amendment to add 2 new positions in order to respond to the workload that we have, one in long range and one in current planning. And Grant is the one that we've been able to have for current planning, and he'll be backing up Ethan on a lot of different things. So you may see him again on this meeting.
Welcome, Grant.
Grant.
Welcome to Georgetown.
Yeah, welcome.
Glad to have you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Do you have any comments you want to add, Grant?
No, I do not. Thank you.
I mean, it's that the new guy always has to do a 10-minute presentation. But we'll let it slide this time, I guess. All right, so thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Steve, for all of your comments. Appreciate it again to the committee. Thank you for all your work on this. We look forward to getting these passed and moved on. I think we've been working on this one for almost a year now. It's crazy, but well, and I say we, it's been mostly you guys, the staff, but thanks a lot for all your work. So, all right, if there's no other comments or questions, then we'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.